Rotary Club, and I want to salute the work that you do in the community, giving back and serving others. I actually kind of try to move away from these party labels. I actually fit the label reform candidate better. Because, I think that we are at a point in our history where both political parties are woefully out of step with the American people. And both political parties have failed, really, to address the long-standing problems of this country that seem to only get worse over the past several years. And this is what inspired me to run for San Diego City Council during what was mentioned was one of the most troubling periods of our city's history. I was a businessman. I was running two very successful companies, one focused on government transformation and management, training government employees and managers in particular on how to use business practices to cut costs and improve performance. Passion for making government work. Thinking how can we constantly analyze government and hold it accountable for improving performance. My second company dealt with financial integrity. In the wake of the Enron scandals, financial management, internal controls and disclosures to implement reforms like Sarbanes-Oxley to make sure that our books are clean in this country. But I was watching, as I was building these companies, what was going on in the city of San Diego. And in 2004, I decided to underwrite a project called the San Diego Citizens Budget Project. I hired a bunch of researchers, and I said, go out, look at the city's budget, and let's see how we can give some ideas on how we can balance it. And at the time, I thought, the city manager, no offense, our city manager was saying we only had a $22 million shortfall, but there was no way to cut costs anymore, and so we had to raise taxes. I think at the time they were talking about a hotel tax, a TOT tax increase. And my opponent in this race voted to place that item on the ballot. And I said, wait a minute, before you go raising taxes, let's make sure we look at all the money that's being spent in the city. What this project helped reveal is that not only did the city have a financial crisis that was much bigger than the $22 million figure that was claimed, but they had done things like issuing false and misleading financial standards, false and misleading financial statements. We are now celebrating this past weekend, the 10th anniversary of the city of San Diego losing its credit rating. 10th anniversary, 2004, September 22nd, the city was stripped of its credit rating. Because of the financial crisis, because of the fact that it had issued false and misleading financial statements, because of the fact that it faced billions of dollars in liabilities in the pension system, as well as a number of other challenges. So we stepped forward and we said, not only do we want to make sure the public has the truth, but we have to make sure that the public knows what are some of the options. How can we fix the situation? And I was one of the first to call on a Republican mayor to resign. Dick Murphy, good man, he's a great judge, but he was not being honest with San Diegans about the true state of the financial crisis. And ultimately, he did the right thing, and he allowed our city to have a second chance and a new mayor, a transition there. But I was willing to take on my own party. And I remember Republicans coming up to me saying, don't criticize these Republican members of the city council. Don't criticize the Republican mayor. They're Republicans. I said, I don't care what their party label is. What I care about is they tell San Diegans the truth about what's going on in the pension system. And I remember these politicians from both parties who voted for these bad deals, who voted for the securities fraud, these guys and gals sat there and continued to say, there's nothing wrong with City Hall that a little bit more of your money wouldn't solve. They said the only thing we need to do is just raise taxes, put more money in the engine, and all will be well. Over the 8-year period, the city cut services to the lowest level we've seen in generations. They eliminated after-school programs, daycare programs for needy families. They reduced library hours by 42%, hitting some of the most neediest neighborhoods. They, of course, as you know, if you've driven on any of our roads recently, they zeroed out road maintenance. Anyone know what slurry sealing is? And again, we've got a good city manager back there for Coronado. If you don't slurry seal your roads every 7 years, it's like an oil change for your car. Your engine will blow up. And what's happened to our roads is the fact that the city decided to skip payments in the infrastructure account. They've decided not to replace water pipes. Neglect of these important investments, maintenance of the city. They cut police and fire programs. And they did get more of our money. They doubled our water rates. And so by 2008, after all these cuts and after all the increases in revenue that they were able to get their hands on, when I walked into City Hall, they were finally talking about bankruptcy. They were predicting bankruptcy for our city. And under bankruptcy, they said more service cuts and more tax increases. We even had the head of the labor unions come in and say, if you go bankrupt, well then, you're going to have to give us Torrey Pines and Balboa Park. At the microphone, insisted that we hand over our assets, our treasures, our generational heritage in this city. And I said, baloney. No more service cuts. No more tax increases. We're going to look through every single city department, and I am absolutely convinced that through reform and rethinking how we spend our money by reforming pensions and adjusting our salary and benefit levels down in line with the local labor market, we can actually balance. And I remember people saying, oh, that's absurd. There's no way. As Mr. Peters last night said, fantasy. It's fantasy what Mr. DeMaio is saying. Well, you know what? He was saying the same thing then. He said we didn't have a financial crisis, and that what I was proposing was fantasy. That you could not raise taxes. I mean, you could not balance without more service cuts and tax increases. Well, San Diegans sided with us. They said no to Prop D, the sales tax increase. And by the way, we won every council district. Talk about bipartisan. We won Democrats, Independents, and Republicans, every socioeconomic group that said no more money for you. And remember the ads. They said that if we didn't do this, what would happen? We'd lay off firefighters and police officers. Your wife would get knifed and your house would burn down, in essence. Was the nature of their story. The attack ads, the false claims. And we said, no, if you insist on reform, then you actually will get an accounting of your money and it will be more properly spent. 2 days after that election in 2010, I rolled out a 360-page budget plan. No one up to that point, except for the city manager and the mayor in the history of our city, offered their own budget plan. No council member was willing to do that. We rolled out a budget plan, and that budget plan with all of our reforms became the playbook by which we balanced the budget without tax increases. And we actually found enough money to restore those library hours. We found enough money to restore browned out fire stations. We found enough money to start turning around our staffing issues in the police department. We found enough money to start paying down some of the infrastructure debt that we have run up and start those projects again in our city. Now, we're not out of the woods yet. Anyone who's seen San Diego says, look, the roads still need a lot of attention. But we finally were able to get out of intensive care into the recovery room. And now with some physical therapy, we're poised to be fully healthy and perhaps run a marathon one day. But it took reform, and it took reaching across party lines. I remember I said, I don't care if I get an idea from a Democrat or a Republican, I just am looking for good ideas. And I'm willing to work with anyone. Donna Fry and I partnered up early on the city council. As you know, she's a staunch Democrat. And the first two things that we did was we said we want to open up the city council process so the minority, a minority group of members, I'm not talking about minority in terms of Democrat or Republican, a lot of times she and I were 2 votes against bad packages. But that the minority should be able to offer legislation and ask for the council to vote on it. We got open government reforms done in the first 90 days. In the first 90 days, on a 2-6 minority between myself and Kevin Faulkner being 2 Republicans, 6 Democrats, I was able to get my reforms into our labor contract and get a unanimous vote in 90 days after taking office. And then, of course, we did a lot more over the course of the 4 years on bipartisan votes, time and time again. Big issue with Donna and me working together was the Downtown Redevelopment Agency. Now, I know Coronado has had its own redevelopment agency, but in San Diego, we had CCDC for downtown. And I believe that there's a role for redevelopment. You have to prime the pump and start the engine. But after that downtown was cooking, to look at our tax increment being diverted from the general fund, being diverted from libraries and after-school programs and public safety, and being used to subsidize development projects, to subsidize profits, that's where I draw the line and say absolutely not. That money has to come back in the form of a dividend. We've redeveloped, We've got the process rolling. Now it's time for you to pay back. And so what we were able to do is transfer debt service on Petco Park, a big redevelopment project. Should have been in the redevelopment fund the whole time. Don and I were able to take that idea that I originally authored and get enough public pressure and ultimately a bipartisan vote. And so I'm proud of the work that we did across party lines. And that leads me to the reason why I'm running for Congress. The problems in Washington are bigger. Instead of billions of liability, we're talking trillions of liability. But the fundamental path to reform is the same. Number one, stand on principle and offer bold ideas. Look for innovative solutions. And this is where I'm challenging the Republican Party. I think the Republican Party has become the party of no too often. And if you really want to reform, don't just say what you're against, say what you're for. And don't just paint in a few colors of the palette. Paint in all the issues that people care about. When was the last time you heard a Republican talk about their solutions on environmental protection? I went into a room in D.C. a few months ago and I said to a group of Republicans, so how many of you actually want to destroy the environment? And no hand went up. I said, well then, why don't you talk more about sustainable environmental solutions where we can have both jobs and reduce our footprint? Where we can talk about renewable energy or energy conservation and water conservation. I think the market has some good ideas. I think that technology and innovation can solve environmental challenges quicker than government mandates. Let's get behind the market. Let's see how we can start solving problems. Healthcare is another good example. Don't just talk about what you're against, but talk about how we're going to change our healthcare system and bend the cost curve. No one has really put forward ideas. Obamacare doesn't do this. I haven't heard a whole lot from Washington to how we bend the cost curve. How do we reduce the cost per patient, the cost of actually running our healthcare system? When we start lowering the cost providing services in the healthcare industry, you'll make healthcare more affordable, more accessible. You'll get better quality care. And so we have an opportunity to take lead and get reform done, but only if you're willing to lay out positive solutions. Second, on the city council, I insisted that we not get involved in social issues. And in San Diego, I actually hope that we move the country into a mode where it's similar to how we talk about social issues. San Diego is a very diverse city. You've got different ethnicities, different political views. You have young and old. You have all this different perspective that's brought to the table. But unlike many other cities with great diversity, we have so much tranquility. San Diegans are so respectful. We're laid back. And when we talk about some of these issues, it's with mutual respect. It's with appreciation from different points of view. I would like to see us do that nationally. I'd like to see us get off of divisive social issues and say, look, politicians shouldn't tell you how to live your life, shouldn't tell you what your health decisions should be, shouldn't tell you who you should love. We should simply focus on fiscal and economic issues, on fixing what's wrong in our government, because people who can't balance their own checkbooks shouldn't be telling you how to live your life. And you know what? I will be the first to defend religious freedom. I was with a rabbi a few months ago, and he said, Carl, I do not agree with your position on marriage equality or on women's choice. I said, that's all right, Rabbi. I respect that and understand that, and I will defend your right to be wrong. I will be at the front of the pack saying, look, these are issues that should be left to individuals and faith-based organizations and churches for people to decide in the context of their own personal values, their own faith beliefs, their own definition of the family. Let's get us back on the issues that we really should see government focused on and making progress on. But all too often, both political parties use these social issues as shiny objects to distract from these issues that they don't have answers for or that they're not willing to take on. And they use these issues to gin up the base, and they're used to divide us, not unite us. I actually think there's a lot more unity in this country on the issues that matter than most of these political parties are willing to let us see. Even on the issue of immigration. Last night, we talked about immigration. They said, well, what do you think we should be doing on immigration? And I said, it's simple. Secure the border first. Now, there are other immigration reforms we need to make, no doubt about it, and I'm supportive of a variety of them. But the American people want to know that we can secure the border so that when we do make progress on immigration reform, and change things like the visa programs and implement things like E-Verify, that no one's going to be able to run to the front of the line and bypass that new improved system. They want the assurance and the accountability and the transparency of a secure border. And lo and behold, when you actually ask the question to Republicans, Independents, and Democrats, do you believe that the first priority in immigration reform should be securing the border? The answer is a majority of Democrats and a supermajority of Independents and Republicans. Latinos, according to PPIC's latest California poll, a supermajority of them support securing the border. And so, okay, with all this agreement in this country, you'd think, okay, you know, we may disagree on some of these other issues, but can we at least check the box on this one? We kind of got the agreement and the consensus here. Let's check the box. Let's show the American people we can actually get something done. And maybe, just maybe, the success of that accomplishment will yield trust and a working relationship that's in a better spot for perhaps dealing with some of the issues where there's not consensus yet. That's what we did on the city council. I took a business approach to moving the ball, moving the goalpost. With each pass, I would always say, this is a good start, there's still some flaws, and we need to do more. Pension reform was not done in 2012, overnight. It wasn't just one and done. We'd actually done 3 waves of pension reform leading up to that. And each time we made improvements, each time we made progress, we built some trust, and ultimately we were able to get the job done with the ultimate reform package that the voters imposed in 2012. That's the approach I'm going to take in Washington. It's not going to make me popular. I've already been attacked by the far right in this primary for not being moral. You know, again, that's their right, but I was very pleased on election night to know that I could stand up there and say, San Diegans were given a choice. I wasn't a nominee for my party by default. They had a choice. And San Diegans said that what they wanted to see a party that could transform itself, could be more inclusive, could reach out to diverse communities, and could respect personal freedoms. And it was focused on fiscal and economic reform. And we were able to show that we not only won a majority of Republicans, but a majority of Independents, and keeping Mr. Peters to just 42%, obviously we won a portion of the Democrats too. Ultimately, I think that message is something that unites San Diegans. It's going to unite, hopefully, Americans as we take this reform agenda national. With that, let me open it up to comments, questions, suggestions that you might have. Please don't be shy. Yes, sir, right back there in the blue shirt.
What's your next debate?
I think it's taped on October 9th for ABC, and then it plays a couple days later. But you can watch the NBC 739 debate online. We're posting a full YouTube of it. We loved it. We absolutely loved the debate last night because my focus was on reform and getting things done. If someone in politics wants to call their opponent names, so be it. I can't control that. But I can talk about what we were able to do working together. And I'm very proud of what we as San Diegans did to make San Diego a model in getting past financial challenges. Yes, sir.
2 things. The budget obviously is the big elephant in the room back in DC because no one can move there. And also getting the 2 parties to work together. We talked about the council. That's like, you know, Little League versus Major League. You know, so no one's going to work there. They're very much polarized. What would you do differently?
We had the same dynamic at City Hall. The unions were very much in control of the city council, and we had Mikey Geary to deal with. And so you had a branch of government off to the side that wasn't going to work. I think that the number one thing that we have to do is get a group of leaders on both sides of the aisle who are willing to offer real solutions, specific reforms. Second, we've got to change the entire process back there. And one of the things I'm going to fight for is the same reform I fought for in my first 2 years with Donald Fry, and that's open government. I want to change the rules of Congress so that 25% of the members, if they sign a discharge petition, can bring a piece of legislation to the floor. Right now, Boehner, under the Hastert rule, and Pelosi prior to him, so this isn't just a Republican thing, they both do it. Harry Reid is doing this in the Senate right now. They refuse to even put a piece of legislation on the floor for a vote if they don't agree with it, or if they want to hold hostage a good idea to embarrass the other party. I think this is absolutely corrosive. Both parties engage in it, and so the reform has to be a bipartisan reform and saying, look, when you're in the majority, we don't like it, and when we're in the majority, you don't like it, so why don't we allow a process whereby a majority of the members get a chance to pass legislation, which means that you need to have some protocol for a certain threshold of minority members to call the question on legislation.
Right, but to get that vote, you gotta go through the heavies to allow it to go to the vote.
I agree. It's not going to be easy. It's not going to happen overnight. Take a look at what I'm trying to do in terms of proposing that we strip Congress of the perks, eliminate the congressional pensions, eliminate the Obamacare subsidies for members of Congress, strip them of the taxpayer or the special interest funded trips that they take. They took $4 million in free trips last year. Require that they read the bill first, a 72-hour posting requirement. And then the single subject rule. The single subject rule, it would require that if you are passing a piece of legislation, it has to be under one germane subject. They are loading up each of these must-pass bills with all sorts of unrelated goodies. This is how you get the sweetheart tax breaks for big corporations. This is how you get those subsidies snuck into the budget for like mohair. I didn't even know what mohair was until I figured out we subsidize a lot of it. Apparently it makes things like jackets. Just crazy unrelated sweetheart provisions that they sneak into bills. The single subject rule would require a single vote on each unique topic in the bill.
That's revolutionary. The Canadians have been trying to get that done for a long time.
Well, yes, some people have, but right now the Fix Congress First program that I've laid out, which has been out for a year, is now starting to get a lot of Democratic support and Republican support around the country. Candidates running for Congress are talking about fixing Congress through eliminating perks and changing the rules.
What about the budget, though? We're not talking about
Budget. I'm going to take the same approach to the budget. We're going to look at every single program. We're going to see how we can do performance audits, competitive bidding. Scott voted against competitive bidding in the city, and then he just recently voted once again against competitive bidding in the U.S. Congress for the federal government. And so we need to look at every opportunity to save money and then put the savings back into the services that we've lost. We're working on legislation with veteran groups on the VA, taking some of the process improvements that my companies did and applying those in the VA health system. And then finally, the best way to start closing the gap on the budget is to have a real economic program in this country that focuses on job creation. Can you imagine if everybody who wanted a job could get a job? What our budget would look like? You'd have lower need for entitlement programs or welfare programs because people have jobs, less reliance on the social welfare programs, and you'd have a flood of revenue because people are paying taxes and contributing to the economic system. And so I think that we need to have a budget-oriented strategy that's pro-growth on the economy as well as pro-efficiency on how we spend our money. And I'll be rolling out my own budget plan. As a member of Congress, I will roll out my own set of budget ideas to how we can solve the national debt crisis. People, when they heard I would do that as a candidate for council, kind of laughed and chuckled and said, yeah, whatever. Even the mayor, I remember the day, 2 days after the sales tax defeat, we rolled out our budget plan, and the mayor's chief of staff thought my budget plan was a PowerPoint deck because she had gotten it ahead of time. So we went up to Jerry's office and we sat down and I said, Jerry, I want to make sure that I give this to you before I release it to the media tomorrow. And the chief of staff kind of sneeringly said, well, we already had your budget plan. She threw the thing on the table. I said, oh, no. See those binders being rolled into the room? Those are the budget plans that we're rolling out tomorrow. And the CFO, as well as the COO, Jay Goldstone, looked through the budget and said, Mr. Mayor, this actually balances. And we have to do some legal checks on whether we can do all this stuff. But yeah, I mean, first blush, this works. And ultimately that became our plan for how we were able to balance the budget. And we worked together with the mayor. The mayor then got on board for pension reform. And we were able to roll forward on that in a collaborative way. So it doesn't happen overnight, but if you don't offer a good idea, you have nothing but rhetoric and partisanship. You gotta fill the void with good ideas. And I think that has been lacking in Washington for many years. Yes, ma'am, right here.
On the redevelopment, I may have misunderstood you, but we felt like we did really good things We felt like we did really good things with our redevelopment money here in Coronado.
Right.
So did I misunderstand when you said the city should pay that back? I mean, the city of San Diego, I don't know how they use theirs, but I know I'm on several boards that we thought the money was used very wisely for the schools, the community centers and all that. So
Right.
maybe I misunderstood. What
Yeah, I
you
don't
said.
know how you guys in Coronado used it. We were focused on CCDC. CCDC in San Diego downtown would take the general fund monies, instead of putting the money into schools and after-school programs, park and rec programs, police and fire, they diverted the money to development projects as well as subsidizing private developments. And so when I went in there and I saw that we were still carrying the debt service in the general fund for Petco Park, I said, wait, let me get this straight. So you took our general fund money from downtown so that you could do projects like Petco Park. Yeah. But then you took Petco Park and you stuck it back in the general fund. No. You guys already got our money. You're going to pay for your redevelopment projects out of your redevelopment funds. I mean, this was a colossal shell game that they were playing. And it took us a few years to get down to the bottom of the answer. Then on the convention center, we did the same thing. The debt service on the convention center was being paid for out of the general fund. I said, no, the convention center is a redevelopment project. It's in the redevelopment area. And so I expect that we will be looking at that as a way of reforming and moving money that should not be in the general fund, or moving expenditures that should never be in the general fund back over to redevelopment, and then getting our money back to the general fund for schools, after-school programs. Last comments and questions? Yes, ma'am, right here.
Along the lines of budget, first of all, thank you very much for coming.
Thank you for the invitation. We've been waiting to get here. We've really been eager to get into your club.
Sequestration in 2000.
The neat cleaver approach to budgeting. I don't think that the neat cleaver approach to budgeting is rational. I think there are some programs that could probably be reformed significantly more, and other programs that are woefully underfunded. So what I want to do is take a performance-based approach to how we invest our tax dollars. We absolutely need to have a more strategic approach, and that's what I did with the roadmap to recovery budget that we released. We found ways to reinvest in programs that were cut too far. Comments and questions? Right in the back, next to the Scott Peters table. No, not you guys. He actually sends his staff here to record everything I say. Hi, Scott.
Carl,
Yes, sir.
what would you do about the increasing amount of welfare people that don't seem to want to work, and the tendency for our country to become a socialistic country? What are you going to do about that?
Well, I think your
when
first
you get
question
elected?
is, your first question is probably reflective of the second question, and that is this. I want us to get people back to work. And I do not believe that the unemployment rate truly captures the economic struggle in this country today. You have people who have literally given up on their search for employment, and they fall out of that unemployment rate. You have people who are in a job, but they're not making enough to support their family, to make ends meet, and they're falling farther behind. You have some people who are in a job that they absolutely hate because they can't get a job in the career of their vocation. And so I want us to be focusing on restoring the American dream in this country. I've been at college campuses and high schools an awful lot because we're trying to reach that next generation, and we're being very successful with that. And I tell them the story about being orphaned at age 13 and having no money. My dad leaving 2 weeks before my mom died. And having to go to Georgetown and having a great opportunity to go to Georgetown on scholarship and having no money to pay for my insurance, my room and board, my food, or my books. And so I had to get a full-time job at Georgetown. And then right out of college, after 3 years, I said, I want to start my own company. And so I went to SBA to get financing, and I couldn't get any because they said I didn't have experience. They also didn't like my idea, this government agency, of reforming government. They said, oh, boy, that's not a good idea at all. Go away. Then I went to a big bank, and I said, I'd like to get a line of credit to start my company, to train government employees and private sector managers in performance management. She said, sounds like a great business plan. You know what you're doing. Do you have a house? I said, no. Do you have a stock portfolio? No. Well, if you can't securitize your line of credit, then we can't give it to you. I said, well, if I had money, why would I be here asking you for money?
was a wake-up call. I was able to take out 3 credit card applications and, max out my cards and get my credit completely bloated. But we got our first seminars off the ground and capitalized the company. That was 1993. 1993. If I were to try to do the same thing today, I wouldn't succeed. I'd fail. I wouldn't be able to get a full-time job to make it through SCSU or UCSD. I might get a part-time job, but not a full-time job. I certainly wouldn't be able to get financing and be able to make a business successful in this market. People are struggling just to make their businesses break even. And so I basically conclude with this. We want to get people off welfare. We want to get people to be independent. Then why don't we get the American dream back in this country? Shouldn't the American dream be easier for each generation, not harder? Shouldn't we be getting better at this, not worse? And yet for me, if I were to try to do the same thing again, I wouldn't be able to do it. I'd fail. And I don't think that we should have that world. I think that these kids deserve the same opportunities I did to overcome adversity and to grab that portion of the American dream for themselves. That's how you get people off welfare. That's how you get more revenue put into our nation's budget, our state's budget, our local budget, because people are paying taxes and contributing. That's how you get quality programs to invest in the next generation. And this is not a Democrat or Republican goal. This should be all of our goals. We may have differences in how we want to approach it, but we should all want to end up at the same destination. My hope is that even though if you don't agree with me 100% of the time, and nobody will, that you'll see that we agree on most issues, and that doesn't make us enemies on the issues that we disagree. It makes us overall allies on the vast majority of issues that we agree on. Thank you very much, and I look forward to serving you.